Well, the regular season is in the books, and we're on to conference championships coming up this weekend. Pac-12 championship game Friday night. The other 4 Power 5 conference championship games are on Saturday, along with most of the Group of 5 conference championships as well. I'm going to do things a little bit different this week with the preview and prediction videos. Instead of doing one video with a bunch of games in it, I'm going to do a separate video for several of the conference championship games. And I figured, why not start with the SEC championship game, Georgia versus Bama, with this channel. That's probably the game people want to hear me talk about the most. So here we go. Georgia versus Bama for a spot in the playoffs and an SEC title. Let's do it. Yeah, good morning in that, though, but it's Uncle Lou here, though. Yeah, that's right, it's me, Uncle Lou, and guess what? I'm live for you on LouTube today. Thanks for watching. Really appreciate it also, and tune addition to that as well. Hey, subscribe to this channel if you're not already. Did you know I post college football videos almost every single day of the year? It's true, and some of them are even watchable. I don't know about this one. You can let me know in the comments down below at the end of the video whether you thought this one was watchable or not. www.betnow.eu. That's where I get all my numbers from when I do these preview and prediction videos. I've been using betnow.eu for years. I've never had a problem with them. It's easy to get money in, get money out. So all the numbers that I talk about in today's videos, the odds, the lines, the over-unders, all that kind of stuff is going to come straight from the site at www.betnow.eu. If you're looking to bet some money on this weekend's conference championship games, check out betnow.eu. You can enter the promo code Uncle Lou. That's one word, all lowercase letters, Uncle Lou, and they'll give you a bonus on whatever you deposit. Good luck. All right, here we go. 4 o'clock on CBS, live, Atlanta, Georgia, Mercedes-Benz Stadium, the SEC championship game. And this is going to be a good game. I'm a college football fan, and obviously Georgia's my favorite team. I don't try to hide that. But when I make these preview and prediction videos, I try to give it to you straight. I have not bet on Georgia to cover every single week this year. You can go back and watch the videos if you don't believe me. Georgia's a 6-point favorite, and this is rare that Alabama is an underdog. You're not going to find very many times in Nick Saban's tenure at Alabama where he's been an underdog. I know they were an underdog to Georgia way back in 2015 when they played, and of course Alabama ended up winning that game. 2017, 2018, and 2020, the 3 times Georgia and Alabama have played under Kirby, Alabama was favored in all 3 of those games, a national title game, an SEC title game, and a regular season game last year in Tuscaloosa. Also, famously, or infamously, in all 3 of those games, Kirby versus Saban, Kirby has had a halftime lead. Georgia has been beating Alabama at halftime each of the last 3 times we've played. Alabama has come back in the second half each of those 3 games to beat UGA, making quarterback changes in 2 of the 3 games, switching from Hurts to Tua in 2017, switching from Tua to Hurts in 2018, and then, of course, Mac Jones with a great second half last year to lead Alabama back to a big win over UGA at home for Alabama in Tuscaloosa. History doesn't play these games, though. Past doesn't play these games. These are 2 really good teams. In my opinion, Georgia is the better team, and I don't think I'm alone in that opinion. Georgia's been ranked number 1 since the playoff poll came out. They've been in the top 5 all year long. They've been consistently good week in and week out over the entire course of the season. There hasn't really been a week where they sort of slipped up or got caught sleeping or anything like that. They have dominated every opponent week in and week out over the course of the season. Alabama, on the other hand, has looked dominant at times. I thought they played really good against Ole Miss. But then there's the loss on the road at Texas A&M. There's the 6-point win at home against a really bad LSU team where Alabama only rushed for 6 yards. There's having to survive an onside kick at the end of the game to beat Arkansas by 1 score. There's beating a pretty bad Florida team by 2 points because Florida missed an extra point or a 2-point conversion. And then, of course, the Iron Bowl this past weekend where Alabama was held to, I believe, a field goal until the very last drive of the game for Bryce Young, where he marched them down the field 97 yards. An amazing drive by Alabama and Bryce Young, and we'll talk more about Bryce Young in a little bit. Tied the thing up at the end of the 4th quarter, and, of course, Alabama ends up winning in 4 overtimes. I watch a lot of college football every single year. Obviously, I watch a lot of Georgia. An SEC homer. I've watched a lot of Alabama. They're the best. They've been the best program in college football over the last 10 to 12 years. I've watched a lot of Alabama. Alabama is not, just doesn't look like the team this year that I'm used to seeing from Alabama. There's a lot of mental mistakes. There's players out of position on defense. Their offensive line is pretty bad. They gave up 5 sacks last week to Auburn. On the other hand, Stetson Bennett, Georgia's quarterback, has only been sacked 6 times all year. They've had no running game, really, for almost the entire year, and injuries have really hurt them there, too. They're down to just 1 scholarship running back, depending on what happens with Brian Robinson this weekend when they play. He's got some sort of a pulled hamstring, I believe. Nick Saban described it as a pulled leg muscle. So take that however you will. But I would be surprised if he played this week, honestly. And if he does play, I don't think he'll be anywhere close to 100%. So Alabama's ground game, particularly in this game against Georgia, in my opinion, is going to be non-existent. I don't even really expect Alabama to attempt seriously even to try to run the ball all that much. I wouldn't be surprised to see Bryce Young have close to 40 pass attempts, maybe even more. Georgia's got, of course, everyone knows, a great defense, great against the run. Their front seven is probably the best front seven in all of football. The D-line is huge and big and talented and full of NFL players. Alabama has struggled to run the ball against average defenses. It's hard to imagine Alabama figuring out a way to really do anything on the ground against this Georgia defense. Where I do think Alabama can and will have some success on offense is through the air. There's no doubt about it. Bryce Young is one of, if not the best quarterbacks in all of college football. He may end up winning the Heisman here in a couple of weeks. We'll see. And they've got some really, really talented receivers. Jamison Williams, a transfer from Ohio State, is almost uncoverable at times when you watch Alabama play. Mechie's not bad either on the other side. Tight end Bolden, is that his name? He's okay. So the skill players, at least on the perimeter and the quarterback, are pretty good. They're really hurting at the running back position, and their offensive line, particularly their right tackle. Alabama's right tackle might be one of the worst right tackles in the SEC. And again, I'm not trash talking. That's my honest opinion. Go back and watch the Auburn game. It looked like the guy wasn't even trying. Like he was on roller skates. Just got pushed around by Auburn's defense. And I think Georgia's game plan defensively is going to be to get pressure on Bryce Young, right? Can Georgia do that with a four-man rush, or are they going to have to send extra guys? Are they going to have to blitz? Are they going to have to send a linebacker, a safety, a corner? I think you'll see some of both. What I don't think you're going to see is Georgia just rushing three and letting Bryce Young sit in the pocket. I think those wide receivers are too talented, and Bryce Young is too good of a QB to let him just sit back there. In the games that I've watched this year from Alabama, when you can get Bryce Young under pressure moving around, it does seem to affect him. It does seem to affect him a little. Georgia's pass rush has been amazing all year long. That combined with maybe the worst offensive line Alabama's had in about 10 years, I don't think that's a good recipe for success for Alabama. When you flip things around to Georgia offensively, it starts with Stetson Bennett. And look, I don't know what to tell you about Stetson Bennett. I'm not the biggest Stetson Bennett fan you'll find. And clearly he's nowhere near the quarterback that Bryce Young is. That is obvious. There is, however, a big difference between this year's Stetson Bennett and last year's Stetson Bennett that played on the road in Tuscaloosa and threw all those interceptions in the second half. Stetson Bennett played a lot of hero ball last year. It seemed like he was always trying to make the big play, ended up throwing some passes he probably shouldn't have thrown, thought he could fit the ball into some windows that he just couldn't fit them in, right? And he sort of learned the hard way last year that it's not that easy to complete passes in the SEC. He's done much better on that this season. He's really toned it down with the turnovers. No more hero ball. He does seem to get Georgia into the right plays, out of the bad plays, and maybe most importantly, he is more mobile than JT Daniels. Now, Stetson Bennett's not going to run for 100 yards on you or anything like that, but he can move around when he needs to. I have seen him pick up several first downs with his legs this year. A touchdown run against Tennessee that was pretty good. So he does have that advantage over JT Daniels. Clearly, JT has better arm talent, but this is Stetson's team. And a lot of people are saying, well, Kirby's playing mind games and he's going to put JT Daniels in the second half against Alabama. It's not going to happen unless Georgia's losing. There is no secret plan to beat Alabama with two quarterbacks just because Alabama beat us with two quarterbacks in 17 and 18. That's just ridiculous. Coaches don't think that way. Coaches are going to play who they feel like gives their team the best chance to win, not some kind of a mind game or a trick to switch QBs out because the other team did it to you once a couple of years ago. Stetson Bennett is the guy. The only way you're going to see JT Daniels in this game, like I said, in my opinion, is if Georgia falls behind in the second half of this game. Maybe they go with JT Daniels to try to air it out some. Georgia offensively, run the ball, tight ends. Now, they can be explosive. They hit some big plays. Brock Bowers is going to be a problem for Alabama. I'm sure most Alabama fans know who Brock Bowers is. If you don't, you're going to find out on Saturday. It's an amazing tight end. Goes great with Darnell Washington. George Pickens came back last week against Georgia Tech, played 6 plays, was targeted once, caught the ball, a little hitch pass, gained 4 or 5 yards, and that was it. Didn't see much from George Pickens. Lots of reports that he looks great in practice, that he's jumping and making all kinds of circus catches like we're used to seeing him do. Are we going to see that this week against Alabama from George Pickens? My money is on no. I think there's a big difference between playing in practice and playing in a game, and I just don't know that George Pickens has the experience and is game ready enough yet to really have a quote-unquote breakout game against Alabama. Now, obviously, that's something I hope I'm wrong about. I think, a 100% healthy George Pickens who plays 20 or 30 plays a game is a problem for anybody. I just don't expect to see that this week. Maybe he plays a little more than he played last week. Instead of 6 plays, maybe he gets 10 to 12, something like that, 2 or 3 targets instead of the 1. But there are some people, expecting George Pickens to come out and catch 200 yards and 2 touchdown passes. And like I said, I would love for that to be the case, but I don't see that happening. But Georgia's got other weapons at wide receiver, some of which were a complete surprise to most people heading into this year with all the injuries Georgia had at wide receiver. Guys like A.D. Mitchell, Ladd McConkey, Kearis Jackson is supposed to be back, Jermaine Burton. So there are some options there. And, of course, at running back, you're talking about Zamir White, James Cook. Could have Kendall Milton back this week. Kenny McIntosh just loaded at the running back position like they always are. James Cook could have a big game here, too, Georgia's running back. He's kind of what a lot of people would call a third down back, although he plays on first and second down a lot of times at UGA as well. But he's what people would typically refer to, I think, as a third down back. He's an amazing pass catcher out of the backfield. He can line up in the slot. We've seen him line up at wide receiver. We've seen him line up in the backfield and motion out to a wide receiver. Of course, what Georgia's trying to do there is get him matched up one-on-one on an inside linebacker or a safety, which just isn't going to be able to cover James Cook. I would not be surprised to see James Cook have a big game here. Defensively for Alabama, Will Anderson is an absolute beast. There's not enough good things I could say about Will Anderson. Everyone would love to have Will Anderson on their team. He's an unbelievable player. And I don't think there's a way to just take him completely out of the game. I think he's going to make some plays, whether that's tackles for loss, whether it's a sack or 2 on Stetson Bennett, whether it's chasing Stetson Bennett out of the pocket, whatever it is. Will Anderson is Will Anderson. He's going to make some plays. And much to my surprise, Henry Toa from Tennessee, the transfer from Tennessee, has actually played okay at inside linebacker. I don't think that overall this Alabama defense is as good as a lot of the Alabama defenses we've seen under Nick Saban, but it's not a terrible defense. They're ranked pretty high in every statistical category you look at. They're giving up about 19 or 20 points a game, which is not bad in today's college football. Of course, Georgia's defense giving up about 6.5 points a game, but you guys have been hearing about Georgia's defense all year long. I don't know what I could possibly come on here and tell you about Georgia's defense that would be news. It's a historically great defense. I'm not going to get into the debate of best of all time, best of the last 25 years. None of that really matters to me right now. The point is they are historically one of the best. Historically, they're going to go down as one of the best defenses. Where you rank them is up to you, but it's a great defense. Alabama's had some of those types of defenses under Nick Saban, right? You go back to 2011, Alabama's defense unbelievable, and a lot of other years it was really, really good. Not terrible this year, Alabama's defense by any means, but not as dominant as a lot of the defenses we've seen. What's the score going to look like here? What are the whole what does Alabama have to do to win the game, or what does Georgia have to do to win the game? I think Georgia just has to do the same things Georgia's been doing all year, which is not turn the ball over. Stetson's got to be consistent on offense. He needs to complete a high percentage of his passes. Clearly no turnovers. Georgia, a lot of short passes from Georgia. They throw a lot of screens. I'm talking running back screens, wide receiver screens, tight end screens. They run a lot of screens, a lot of hitch passes, a lot of swing passes out of the backfield. They sort of dink and dunk you to death, and then as soon as you start to creep up a little bit, they will hit one over the top on you to Ladd McConkey or one of the other wide receivers. I've seen it time and time again this year. Same thing with the running game. They just pound and pound and pound and pound and pound for what seems like 3 yards for every single carry. And then in the second half, all those 3-yard runs are 5 and 6 yard runs and then 10-yard runs. It's kind of the same Georgia blueprint, at least run game wise, that Georgia's been using really since Kirby got there. The passing game is really what has taken Georgia's offense to the next level offensively. I still wish we had one of the elite college quarterbacks. I would feel a lot more comfortable heading into any big game if Georgia had a quarterback that I felt like could go out and win a game for us. And again, this isn't a bash Stetson thing. I think Stetson's good. I just don't think he's on the level of some of the other quarterbacks. And if you ask me what worries me about UGA, it's, what are we going to do if we're down a couple of scores in the second half and Stetson has to throw us back into the game? It's not that I think Stetson would fail and fall on his face. It's just that I really don't know what he would do because, he hasn't had to do it this year. Georgia's been up by 20, 30, 40 points in almost every game they've played in the second half. Stetson hasn't even played in a lot of second halves in those games. So that would be my concern. But overall, he's played well. He loves the tight ends. He loves throwing to the tight ends. The running backs are his best friend. Georgia's offense just needs to do what they've been doing all year long. Defensively for Georgia, same thing. I don't think Georgia's going to shut Alabama out. I keep hearing, oh, God, I want to see Georgia win 28-0 over Alabama. Well, of course, I want to see that too, but we're trying to live in reality here. I don't think Jameson Williams can be completely shut down for the course of the game. I don't believe that. Now, there's this narrative out here that Georgia's secondary is its weakness, that they don't have a good secondary, that their pass defense is not great. Georgia's second in America in pass yards allowed. Georgia's allowing something like 150, 160 yards a game through the air. And you can point out anything you want about the teams Georgia's played or whatever else. We're not a week or two into the season here. Georgia's played 12 games, the same as everybody else, and they've got the number 2 pass defense in America, giving up 150 or 160 a game. Now, I'll be the first to admit that a lot of that is probably due to the front 4 or in the front 7. Teams don't have a lot of time to sit back in the pocket and throw against this team. The secondary has gotten beat at times this year. It's happened against Tennessee. It's happened against a lot of teams. Some teams hit those plays. Some teams missed them. Georgia's cornerbacks, I wouldn't consider Georgia's corners to be locked down, although Darion Kendrick has played really, really well, our transfer from Clemson. Keely Ringo's a first-year starter on the other side at corner. He seems to be in pretty good position a lot of times, but he's young and he's got a bad habit of not getting his head turned around. I've seen a lot of footballs go straight past his ear hole this season. If he could learn to turn his head around, he'd probably have 2 or 3 more interceptions. And I have seen him get burnt on a couple of occasions this year too. And it would not surprise me one bit to see Alabama pick on him in this game. Jameson Williams and Bryce Young are too good, like I said, in my opinion, to expect Georgia to go in and just completely shut them down. I don't think they're going to run the ball like I mentioned. Forget that. They're not even going to attempt that, in my opinion, and if they do, it's not going to work. There's nothing Alabama can do between last week and this Saturday to fix that, their ground game. There's not. The offensive line just isn't great. The injury situation at running backs has been unbelievable for Alabama. Like I said, down to just one scholarship running back if Brian Robinson's not able to go. So just forget that. Alabama's going to go as far in this game as Bryce Young will take them. And Bryce Young can take them far. I mean, it won't surprise me at all to see Bryce Young win the Heisman. He's a really, really good QB. I just think in college football, more times than not, the best team wins. Alabama has had the best team in football almost every single year for the last 12 years, and they've got 6 national titles to show for it. This particular year, these 2 particular teams, again, this has nothing to do with last year's Alabama or Georgia in 2017, and it's got nothing to do with next year's Alabama, who's probably going to be a lot better than this year's Alabama. This particular year, with these 2 particular teams, it just seems to me like Georgia is the better team. And if Alabama's going to win this game, it's probably going to mean that Georgia turned the ball over, that Alabama had some type of a special teams touchdown or something, trick plays. I remember a few years ago, Nick Saban pulling an onside kick in the second quarter of a game. It's going to take stuff like that, in my opinion, for Alabama to win this game. The line's at 6 points. Georgia's favored by 6. I really believe that if it weren't for the uniforms that Alabama is wearing, this would be a 10-plus point game. I feel like if you did one of those blind resume tests and you watched these 2 teams, but you didn't know it was Alabama, they have not looked impressive this year the majority of the season. Again, in my opinion, they have struggled to move the ball. They've had defensive breakdowns. They've got penalty issues. They've had special teams issues with the holder dropping the ball. Bryce Young fumbled a couple of snaps last week. It's just been an uncharacteristically a sloppy year, really, for Alabama. And when you look at Georgia, that just hasn't been the case. They've played really, really well from the beginning of the season to the end. No slip-ups, no hiccups, no games that you looked up in the third quarter and went, oh, my God, what's happening here? They've just dominated every single opponent they have played this year. You go back and look at last week's Georgia Tech game, and yes, believe me, I know Georgia Tech is absolutely horrible. Georgia was up 40 points in the second half of that game. They had second and third stringers in for most of the time. Georgia committed a grand total last week against Georgia Tech of 0 penalties. Now, I'm not saying that to brag or that's why we beat Georgia Tech because we had 0 penalties. To me, that's an indication of how focused and dialed in this team is, that even in the second half of these blowouts, they are so focused. I mean, not so much as a false start, not an offsides, not a delay of game, a too many men on the field, nothing. 0 penalties in a 45-0 beatdown of their in-state rival, Georgia Tech, to me, shows where Georgia's mindset is as a team. I think Georgia's going to win this game, and I think Georgia's going to cover the 6 points. Would I be surprised if Alabama won the game? Of course not. This is Alabama we're talking about here. Like I said, trash talk is one thing. And believe me, tomorrow's hype and hate video, there'll be plenty of that. I just don't think Alabama is a good enough team this particular year to beat this particular Georgia team. That's it. This isn't who is it? Paul Feinbaum. As soon as Clemson lost like 1 or 2 games, Paul Feinbaum's running around talking about, well, Clemson's run is over. Oh my God, they went 9-3. Just might as well just forget about them for the next 20 years. I'm not suggesting that at all about Alabama. Alabama's going to be just fine. 6 national titles in 12 years. Well, that means that in 6 years, somebody else had to win the national title. And in this particular year, that somebody else is Georgia. I think Georgia wins this game. I think they go on to win the national title no matter who they play in the playoffs. I just think Georgia is clearly the best team in America this season. I would take Georgia and lay to 6 points. Since the college football playoffs started, there has been 24 conference championship games where the spread was 5 points or higher. The favorite in those 24 games is 23-1. You just don't see a lot of upsets in these conference championship games once you start getting past 5 or 6 points in the point spread. I think Georgia hangs on and wins this one by a couple of touchdowns and heads off to the playoffs, and Alabama fans can cry about who they're playing in the Sugar Bowl.